When I listened to the discussion throughout the day, there were a number of themes that quite clearly came through, to my ears at least. Firstly, that there are key practices or conditions that either facilitate or allow corruption to flourish. And those are fairly well known and identified. Secondly, that there are lots of initiatives and interventions, and yet corruption continues to flourish. Thirdly, it's clear that there's a theme across all speakers that this is not an issue, that is corruption, limited to a particular area, to a particular single issue, to a particular single form, to a particular place or time. From that then flows a theme that came also very clearly from all our speakers, which is that the response must thus fit those conditions. The response must accordingly be varied and multi-pronged. It is not feasible to think that a single actor with a single plan will effectively counter corruption. The response needs to be systematic and coordinated. It can't be ad hoc. It can't be just once. Working together is thus essential. I think if there's one theme that came out of every single presentation, it was that we need to work together. We need to support each other. However, what also became very clear to me, and was said by a number of speakers, but just listening at the speakers, it became clear, and that is that there is enough knowledge, there's enough insight, there's enough experience, there's enough mechanisms, there are enough resources to effectively deal with corruption. What we're not doing very well globally is bringing all of that to bear in a coordinated manner, and certainly on our continent. So where do we go from here? And this is where we in the PSA wants to offer a modest contribution, and we're modest about it. We're not suggesting that this is going to solve all the problems, but we do think it can make a contribution, and an important one. Before I start talking about this and invite my colleague Lee Mahler to also talk about it, let me just tell you a small bit about the PSA. The PSA, which stands for Pavocat-Stellenbosch Academy, is a formal partnership between Stellenbosch University and the Pavocat Group of Companies, which is an international group of companies, represented here by our alumnus Lee Mahler, with also a South African presence. The PSA is a unit within Stellenbosch University, which is anchored within our law faculty, but very specifically working across all disciplines. We bring together in this formal partnership thorough theoretical insight, high quality research with highly practical experience on the front line of fighting corruption. And we bring it together in a real partnership. The best partnerships are those that involve synergies and integration between the parties, not just adding. And that's what we do in this unit. We challenge each other continuously from our respective positions. The academics challenge the practitioners to think more, to uncover the reasons, the underlying principles. Why? And the practitioners challenge us academics to be practical. We can't just think. Not good enough. We must also do. So how do we translate these wonderful ideas into real action? As Lee often says to me, it's all good and well to understand something, but how does this help the investigator that must build a file that's going to withstand a prosecution. And that's where we want to get. And we believe that in the partnership we have put together and that we are growing still, we are able to do that. We are able to bring that synergy between these two worlds. But very importantly, ladies and gentlemen, we have no interest in being an island. We have no interest in running a new, wonderful, grand initiative on our own. Our paradigm is one of collaboration. That was from the very start, the DNA that brought us together. It was to collaborate. And that is the key to how we approach everything we do. Collaboration is how we intend to approach what we do. The work of the PSA falls broadly into two broad streams. And this is where we start talking about what is it that we can offer. And before I talk about these two broad streams, and I'm just going to introduce the first one and then invite Lee to talk about the second one. What we hope to achieve through these two streams is to connect the dots, to bring synergies together, to show how we can support each other, to not reinvent the wheel, to learn from each other. Dr. Rogers had this wonderful comment, how do we shorten the learning curve? We don't have time to reinvent the wheel. This is urgent, and we think it can best be achieved by working together. So the first leg of our work that I will talk to, and then Lee will talk to the second one, is a training component. Not surprising that we are a half partnership at university. And this is Advocate Johnson, where I respond directly to your challenge. So Advocate Johnson of the NPA challenged us. She asked, when will universities, colleges approach institutions, NPA, SRU, etc., to identify what skills are needed and then design training accordingly? Advocate Johnson, here we are. Here we are. This is exactly what we're doing. Our training that we offer is highly practical professional training across the entire ecosystem that deals with corruption, counters corruption, both in the public and the private sector. It's all university accredited, so it comes with the quality assurance that a university like this one offers. But unlike standard university training, where a program is designed largely in abstract and then offered into the market and we wait for students to appear at the beginning of the year, we turn that model on its head. We start by asking what the needs of a particular audience or a particular client are. And then we design the training to fit those needs, including the modality needs of the client or of the audience. If we're talking about integrity officers within private companies, we want to understand what type of company is this? What is the type of environment in which you're going to have to do your compliance work? And that enables us to design a training that will fit that purpose. It means that our training is highly, highly bespoke and fit for purpose. In this way, we believe that we can truly respond to Advocate Johnson's call. We can truly contribute to building the capacity that's needed to move the needle on the ground. The second leg of the PSA's work is what we broadly, by lack of a better word, refer to as our think tank component. And for that, I'm going to ask Lee to share with you.
Well, let me start, ladies and gentlemen, by empathising with the learned judge in the sense that I too, sir, am vertically challenged, which means I'm going to have to lower this microphone. Gio, I've spent many days calling him Gio, and then his wife took me aside and said, "You're calling my husband by his wrong name. It's not Gio, it's Gio." And so I've learned to say his name over the last few months. But when I walked outside of this wonderful hall earlier on, Sam Boana from the World Bank pulled me aside. And Sam and I have had the privilege of working together in the past. And he said to me, "Lee, can I give you some advice?" And I said, "No, I'm not interested in hearing it." No, I said, "Of course, Sam, you must." And he said, "Look, this is all well and good, but you need to walk away from just talking, and you need to do something positive. You need to take action." And this is what this session is about. We've heard throughout the day that corruption is pernicious. It exists. It's dreadful. It brings society down. We all know that. There has been some incredible efforts which delegates and colleagues have spoken about. But what the law faculty at Stellenbosch and what Pavocat sort of have thought long and hard about is what more can be done. And we think, humbly, as Gio said, in a very collaborative manner, we think that we should be establishing now the South African Regional Centre of Excellence. And as Gio said, it's going to have two halves. One is the training component, where we are delivering, and we will deliver, highly practical, realistic, professional training to practitioners in the field, to law enforcement, to prosecutors, to judges, to civil society, to compliance officers in companies. But we didn't think that was enough. We thought we needed to go further. And it sounds conceited, and it isn't meant to be. But we want to make a real difference. I'm 58 years old. I spent sort of the last 30 years mainly prosecuting and defending counter-corruption cases. And I've learned a lot in that time, and that is that collaboration and coordination, in a systematic way, is the only answer to this. And so we came up with this plan of a think tank emanating from the South African Regional Centre of Excellence. And we've named that think tank, essentially, the Stellenbosch Dialogue. Now, this is going to be a 2-day high-level conclave of presidents, prime ministers, ministers, international governmental organisations, the multilateral development banks. And we bring them together over 2 days to discuss coordinated and integrated counter-corruption strategies. Now, as Gio and I are fond of saying, I wish we could take credit for inventing this type of forum, but we've unashamedly stolen it from the Manama Dialogue in Bahrain, which is a 2-day conclave on security in the Middle East. And it works. It's in the calendar now for all heads of states, for all international governmental organizations. They come together in Bahrain to talk security. And we believe there is no reason why we can't emulate that here. And we talk about counter-corruption strategies across Africa. And the product of this Stellenbosch Dialogue, this counter-corruption think tank, will be the Stellenbosch Dialogue Counter-Corruption Framework for Africa, which is a living document, effective, coordinated, systemic strategies for the entirety of Africa, which can then lead, ladies and gentlemen, to national dialogues. So we take those grand strategic strategies that will emanate from this, marvelous establishment here. We then go back to the respective African countries. We hold national conversations, and we download essentially those grand strategies into national law, which means that the counter-corruption initiatives moves from being very isolated and very jurisdictionally focused to coordinated, to systemic, so that we all know what we're doing. It's a bit like the initiative from the multilateral development banks that our colleagues from the African Development Bank talked about. In 2006, the MDBs synchronized all of their work to be more effective. In 2010, they implemented the cross-debarment accord, which you've heard about. If the World Bank debars, the African Development Bank will follow. So it's not the same, but these strategies bring us closer together as a community, fighting corruption, which makes us much more effective. Everybody knows what needs to be done, when it's done, and it's a living document. Now, this Stellenbosch Dialogue, this think tank, is not an isolated event. It will be an annual event. So every year, for 2 days, thought leaders, leaders of countries will come here to Stellenbosch to discuss counter-corruption initiatives. It will be a living, evolutionary process. Things will change. Other corruption will change in its nature. And because of the conclave, because of the dialogue, we can react and we can eventually take steps at a grand strategic level to stop this. And it coordinates beautifully with the practical training that we also intend to give. So that is essentially it in terms of what we are proposing. I'm very conscious of the time, and Songezo's coughed twice next to me in a very, very faint manner because he's very keen to head towards a glass of wine, as I'm sure we all are. But before we leave, we've taken the liberty of putting together a declaration, which is hopefully on your seats. And if I can just invite you to look at that document, that declaration. To be brutally honest, I don't think anyone sitting in this room, having heard what we've heard today, will disagree with any of what is written there, save possibly for the last point, which is the declaration. So if I can just pray silence for at least 1 minute to let all of you read that and digest what's there. Now, a number of us drafted that 2 days ago, and we were reticent about doing so because we did not know how this summit would go, what the atmosphere, the thought processes that would be going through your minds. I think privately, Gio and I took the view 10 minutes ago that we are clairvoyant, and that actually there is nothing within this document that, in terms of what we've discussed here, is in any way controversial. In terms of the declaration, we genuinely believe that in a collaborative manner, the South African Regional Centre of Excellence is not here to compete with anyone. It's not here to compete with UNODC, UNCAC, the Commonwealth Secretariat. This is about collaborating and evolving, trying to sort of improve the counter-corruption structures and architectures that already exist. And so I would invite you, colleagues, having read the text of that declaration, to raise your hands if you believe that the establishment of the South African Regional Centre of Excellence and concomitantly the holding of the Stellenbosch Dialogue would be a force for good. So if you believe, as we vehemently believe, that this is the way to go, please raise your hands. Well, that is I'm not sure whether cameras actually pick that up, but what I will say from this podium with a very low microphone is that there was a unanimous show of hands, and we, Gio and I, are incredibly grateful. We had no idea whether, our thoughts, our strategies would be met with a sigh of resignation and here we go again, or really a sense of optimism for the way ahead. And I personally will fly back to London on Friday with a spring in my step, notwithstanding I'm going into Heathrow and it'll be an absolute nightmare. But I will leave here thinking that we have started on a journey which we will capitalise on very quickly, and that this will be a force of good, not just for South Africa, but Africa more widely. And I should also say, in closing, that we are not just setting our sights on Africa. Through the leadership of the law faculty at Stellenbosch, through the Pavocat-Stellenbosch Academy, we have a plan, a cunning plan, to move this initiative into all regions of the world. Because as we said earlier on, corruption is not limited to South Africa, to Africa. It's not limited by borders. I can tell you, as a man who's prosecuted extensively in Asia, in the Caribbean, that this is a plague upon all of our houses. And we will try our level best to establish these regional centres of excellence globally. Again, coordinate all of their efforts, but all of that will be run through here, through Stellenbosch, through the Pavocat-Stellenbosch Academy.